Wow, we are especially excited here on Breaking Kayfabe with Barry and Bowdren, or Bowdren and Barry.
I like it.
I'm sure you do. Not many people that I call the champ, but here today we are joined by former NWA World Heavyweight Champion Dory Funk Jr. Dory, it is absolutely a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hey, thank you very much for the title. That's something that was a long time ago, but it was the highlight of my life, was the time that I spent as NWA World Champion, and also the times that I spent wrestling for Championship Wrestling from Florida. It was one of the finest territories in professional wrestling.
So what we want to specifically speak to you about here is we are very much narrowcasting here. We want to take a look at Championship Wrestling from Florida in the year 1982. Now, you were the booker. You were booker in the early part of that year. So, can you tell us first off, when did you, if you remember, when did you get the book from Eddie Graham? I know it was it in 81?
It was 81. We made the commitment in 82 that I actually came into Florida and was doing the booking.
Okay, and how exactly did Eddie reach out to you and tell you that he was looking to go a different direction and wanted to bring you in? Can you tell us how that worked?
Well, let me give you just a little bit of background. Eddie Graham was spent some time in the Amarillo territory wrestling for my father, Dory Funk Sr. So my family was very close with Eddie and his family. I was a friend of Eddie's and went out spearfishing with he and Mike Graham, with Mike Graham's little boat that he had when Mike was only 12 years old. And we went down to the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. And Mike had his own diving gear and was spearing fish. And we've known Eddie for a long time. Eddie Graham learned a lot that he brought to Championship Wrestling in Florida from my father, Dory Funk Sr., back in the old Amarillo territory.
So you come in and you've got the book. One of the key figures for that year that really sort of, captured me and was part of the reason why I came back, besides yourself, was the arrival of David Von Erich. And David Von Erich was so effective as a heel in the first 6 months in the state of Florida. So my question to you, starting off with, did you bring him in specifically to be a heel, or when he got there, did you decide to turn him heel?
No, we brought him in specifically to be a heel because I watched David grow up from a kid watching his father, Fritz Von Erich. And Fritz Von Erich was one of the finest heels ever in professional wrestling. And all along, people might have thought of David as a babyface, but he was so much like his father that it was a natural thing to make David Von Erich a heel here in the Florida territory.
Yeah, and he had some. Go ahead, Barry.
It didn't hurt anything, David being from Texas either.
Yeah, I'm sure too. So for me, and I've said this a million times, I've said it on our podcast, I think the highlight of the 1980s was the pairing of you and David Von Erich together. And it was kind of this natural pairing where you had a former world champion who was kind of mentoring, this young wrestler who was extremely talented. So there has been a rumor for years that David Von Erich was sent to work with you in the state of Florida because he was being considered for an NWA title run. I've heard some of the boys say absolutely. I've heard others say no, that's just a rumor. If there's
you can take my word, it's true.
It is true. Thank you.
It is true.
So, do you think that the general idea would have been to, give David the title at the Texas Stadium show that Kerry eventually won it at?
Well, I think it wouldn't be a case of giving it to David Von Erich. I think David Von Erich had earned the
of course,
privilege of becoming an NWA World Championship.
Do you think the idea would have been for David to have a shorter run, much like Kerry did, or do you think he would have been in it for the long term?
The consideration that determines whether a champion is a champion for a long time or a short time is his box office appeal. And the champion that's drawing the money is the one that's going to be there, and he's going to call a decision when he wants to leave or if he wants to stay, because that's what the NWA World Championship was all about. It was at the box office. If you drew money, you could make your choices, and David would have had the opportunity, and I certainly think he would have drawn a lot of money for the NWA.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. So if I look at the history of the Von Erichs, I can only see them working as heels in two territories. One being Florida, because not just David, but then Kerry and Kevin came in as well. But also, if I go back and I look at the old Amarillo results, I see that often the Von Erich boys were coming in and they were heels.
Oh yes, they were heels as kids because of but that was because of the Dory Funk Sr. Fritz Von Erich rivalry, which developed out in Texas. And so when the kids came along, we just picked up where our fathers left off.
So let me ask you, what was your relationship as booker with Eddie? Eddie as like the guy that owned the company. Did you find him to be intrusive? Did he kind of let you run the show there while you had the pencil? Like, how did that dynamic work?
Eddie was a brilliant manipulator of professional wrestlers, booker and everything. And he knew how to draw money. It was the combination of Eddie and myself working together in the Florida territory that gave us such a success here. And you can't take away the brilliant mind that Eddie Graham had in regard to professional wrestling and what would be box office appeal. And at the same time, my father, Dory Funk Sr., was my teacher, and he had a brilliant mind on him too. And I think it was a combination of us working together. It wasn't just one person taking over and calling the shots.
Sure. So while this was going on, Dusty had kind of left the state for a while, and you brought in two young guys who I thought got over really well, and that's Butch Reed and Skip Young as Sweet Brown Sugar. What went into the idea to bring those two guys in? What did you see in them?
I knew Skip Young before coming to Florida, and he was a Texas State high jump champion in high school. And he was a fabulous athlete, and I just thought he would do a heck of a job here. And Butch Reed, my gosh, he was an awesome-looking athlete and could get it done in the ring as a wrestler. And I thought those two guys would make fabulous tag team champions, or two people to build a territory around as the very top baby faces.
Yeah, Butch absolutely looked like a future world champion when he was in Florida.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
and it worked. I mean, that was the thing, too. And I remember, there was a period there where we weren't seeing Dusty for months, and Dusty had been in the state now for literally almost a decade. And we're not seeing him, but you were drawing bigger houses. If I go back and I pull up some of these results from 1982, Miami Beach was doing 5,000 fans weekly, and over 5,000 fans, which was really an increase of maybe 1,000 to 1,500 from a year or two earlier. So that there was a testament to the drawing power of Butch Reed and Sweet Brown Sugar. Absolutely.
Well, I feel like I can take credit for part of that as booker, but I think the real important thing was the box office appeal of the talent that I was able to bring to Florida, because they were tremendous athletes and tremendous professional wrestlers.
Dory,
and they were the kind of people that hadn't really gotten their break yet, and they needed the opportunity.
Sure. Dory, a question that's always popped into my mind when it comes to Sweet Brown Sugar, Skip Young. What played into the decision to take the mask off of Skip?
He's not a bad-looking guy.
No, I meant specifically he was really over as Sweet Brown Sugar, and it seemed like he kind of lost a bit of steam after he took the mask off, whether he was a good-looking guy or not.
Okay. He was such an athlete, and he had proven that in Texas high school athletics before he ever got here. State champion in high jump is quite an accomplishment. He could stand in front of a 6-foot fence and do a flat foot right over the top of it. So there's no question he was a great athlete. And then he also had the personality for it too.
And I think we've often said too, one of the best drop kicks, if not the best drop kick in professional wrestling.
The best drop kick.
It was pretty incredible. I'm gonna. He's looking down at you when he drop kicks you. It was incredible. It was something that, that was the whole thing. It was like this standing drop kick. He just literally had springs in his legs.
Yes.
But just a tremendous athlete. But I'm going to piggyback on something that you just said, and it was about giving young guys a chance and kind of giving them this opportunity. Obviously, it paid off, dividends with Butch Reed and Sweet Brown Sugar. But, you gave a couple of other guys who were young and up-and-coming wrestlers a shot. This was Terry Allen, Magnum TA, got his first break underneath your watch in Florida.
Yes, he did, and he was another one, a fine athlete, good talker on television, and just needed the break. And when you have the opportunity to do that, I guess it's really the fans that deserve the credit because they're the ones that are backing them up with their attendance and everything. But some of these talents that came through Florida, there was really something about them that gave them that appeal that drew money for us. And it was kind of thought that Florida would be with Dusty gone. It was there was kind of a feeling, would it be able to survive or not? And everybody got together, and as a teamwork effort, Florida Championship Wrestling didn't only survive, it thrived.
One of the things I noticed, Dory, in watching, I was looking at some of the 1982 stuff on YouTube, which is definitely a must look, is I noticed the amount of depth you had in the promotion. You had guys like, you were talking about giving young guys breaks. You had guys like Ron Ritchie, Eric Embry, El Gran Apollo, Atsushi Onita. I mean, you really had some really solid guys working, on the lower to middle part of the card.
We had solid guys and entertaining matches from the bottom to the top. And I'm grateful for the talent that was available, and I do take credit for having an eye for talent. And we really had some good talent here at Championship Wrestling from Florida. I guess outside of Amarillo territory, I've spent more time in the Florida territory than any of them.
Yeah, absolutely, too. So we referenced this also in the early part of the show. There was a card that was put on February the 20th, 1982 in St. Petersburg. And this is going to reference into my question. I'm just going to go through this card. But international title, Dory Funk Jr. versus Hacksaw Reed. NWA World title, Ric Flair versus Mike Graham. Battle Royal. Now, get this. Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody versus Tenryu and Jumbo Tsuruta. There's my Jumbo Tsuruta reference for this episode, Jeff. Shuey Giant Baba versus Iron Mike Sharp. David Von Erich versus El Gran Apollo. Andre the Giant versus Iron Sheik. Terry Funk and Dick Slater versus Jerry Lawler and Don Diamond. And the opener, Avalanche Tyler versus Eric Embry. So if there's ever been a card that is literally top to bottom, this is it. But this obviously plays into the fact that you were booking and you had a relationship with All Japan Pro Wrestling.
I want to give due credit to All Japan Pro Wrestling, too, because I was booking Florida and working All Japan Pro Wrestling at the same time, and also booking All Japan Pro Wrestling. That gives you access to so much wrestling talent, And when Andre the Giant comes along, what an addition he is. And when you've got access to Ric Flair, putting together a wrestling card that will be exciting for the people to watch, it's not easy. And being the booker is not easy because there's a lot of getting along that you have to do with the wrestling talent that you've got. And I just am so proud of that card, and I appreciate being recognized as the booker for that show. I just am grateful to all the great wrestlers that I had access to book for Championship Wrestling from Florida.
Dory, when you look back at David and his run there, which is in my mind so memorable, you look back, it's been 35 years now, seemingly, if not a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Well, what are your memories of David in the ring and then David outside the ring?
Sincerity. David was a very sincere kid and very serious about his professional wrestling, how he performed, asked me about every match, was concerned. He came from a father, Fritz Von Erich, who was a box office attraction, and it only put the goal up there for David Von Erich to try to succeed like his father did. And that was a very driving pressure on David Von Erich. He did want to show that he could make it on his own without his father pushing him.
So there have been some great matches in CWF throughout the years. And obviously I just referenced this whole St. Petersburg, which was a super card, which if I was aware at the time it was taking place, I absolutely would have gotten in my car and driven down. But you booked a match in June 29th, 1982 in Tampa. And Jeff, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but just the ramifications of the talent that is in the ring. It was a 6-man bunkhouse match, Dory and Terry Funk with their partner Stan Hansen versus Harley Race, David Von Erich, and Dusty Rhodes. You have got 4 NWA World Heavyweight Champions in one match. You've got David Von Erich, who would have been an NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and Stan Hansen, who was an AWA champion and obviously, was one of the top workers in Japan for almost 2 decades. That right there, the ramifications of the talent that is in that match, I'm not quite sure the state of Florida ever saw a match like that before or after.
Stan Hansen is also one of my students.
But yeah, there was some serious talent in that match, no question, Barry.
Yeah, Stan is a West Texas State University graduate, one of many that went on into professional wrestling, basically because of my father, my brother, and myself, and our reputation in Texas. He's a West Texas boy.
Yeah, and you were instrumental also in getting him into Japan, if I'm correct?
Yes. Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Gotcha. So
I'd say instrumental in getting him over to All Japan Pro Wrestling.
Right. So a name that Jeff touched on briefly, and then I brought it up, was El Gran Apollo, who you kind of also underneath your watch, he was getting a push, and he was getting over absolutely huge with the fans. And South Florida, and as well as Tampa, a pretty huge Cuban demographic. And here was El Gran Apollo, and he was really good-looking guy, great physique, could work in the ring. Seemed like he was connecting with the fans. And, I know he went to Puerto Rico at one point, and then he just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And for me, that was, I guess, unexpected because he was so popular in Florida. Any idea of why his career was so short?
I couldn't tell you. When I left Florida Championship Wrestling, he was still here. I met him in Puerto Rico, and he was a young boy for Carlos Colon's promotion out there. And I asked Carlos if we could bring him to Florida and further develop his skills, and he did a great job for us while he was here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dory, one of the things I wanted to ask you, we talked about your connection with All Japan Wrestling and Giant Baba. When the Von Erichs, at some point during a later part in the 80s, made the decision, whether it was because of Fritz or whatever, to make the jump to Inoki's New Japan, what were your thinking? I mean, did you feel a little bit betrayed, or was it just, that's business? I mean, how did you feel about that?
When you're younger, at the time, I would have felt a bit betrayed. But as you go through, everybody in this business has to do what's best for themselves. And where they find the best deal and the best place to make a living, they have to make their decisions. So I don't condemn that at all for any of them. And wrestlers have gone back and forth and worked between promotions when you don't expect it, but that's been going on forever. So what's best for them and best for their family is a decision they got to make.
Obviously, though, you felt a real comfort working with Baba as the promoter over there. I've always heard that he was very fair, very fair payoff guy, very fair to not only the Japanese guys, but the American guys, too.
He was fair in every way. And also a much better worker than he ever really got credit for. He had a brilliant mind about professional wrestling and knew how to do things that needed to be done for box office appeal. So he was his mind. He was a genius.
So one of the things
that some limitations in what he could do in the ring, but he was a brilliant man and a pleasure to work for, and a fair person, like you said.
One of the things I wanted to ask you real quick about was we recently lost Motoko Baba, and Motoko always had a sort of the reputation that they played good cop, bad cop, that Motoko was the bad cop, whereas Baba was the good cop. Would you say that's got any kind of accuracy?
No.
No? So
no, she had to make decisions that she felt were best for business. So, in whatever they were, I'm not against anybody making decisions that affect their lives.
No, and that's what I meant, that, like a lot of times when the tough decisions had to be made, she was the one that came in and had to.
That could be, yes.
Yes. So, Barry, I know we don't have
she certainly got involved in the business.
So, Barry, I know we don't have a real long time with Dory here. Anything you'd like to add to Dory here?
Yeah, absolutely, too. So I just wanted to ask one last question about 1982 and then see if Dory's got a story. But you brought in, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, which was Killer Carl Cox. And I've said it on the show. I love Cox. He's, just a tremendous, in any role, one of the most entertaining professional wrestlers I ever saw in my life. Do you have a really good Killer Carl Cox story that you can share with us?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. Amarillo Territory many years ago, Abilene, Texas. Killer Carl Cox was working with somebody, and he went 17 minutes without touching his opponent. And he came back and said, the fans were going crazy. And my father, who was the promoter, looked at him and said, you're damn right they were going crazy. They were so freaking pissed that you guys didn't touch each other. They didn't have any action. That's why you had so much heat. So who knows? But anyway, it was just you asked for a story, so that's one.
So well, listen, Dory, I want to close since you brought up that name here in closing. Your father, Dory Sr., was such a catalyst in the business and such a figure. People talk about Mount Rushmores, and if there's going to be a Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, certainly one of the most important figures in the history of the business has to be your father, because so many people, including Eddie Graham and guys like that, drew what they knew from your father. So just, I know it's been a long time since your father passed, but, for the uninitiated, tell us a story about your father that maybe, isn't something that's out there, that, a story that they don't know. What kind of person do you remember your father being?
Well, a brilliant teacher, and but he had to have the right kind of student. But if I went in the ring with him, he was my teacher, and I did the very best job I could do. He would say nothing. If I did something wrong, he would certainly tell me. until the night in Tampa, Florida, when he was in my corner, and I won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship from Gene Kaniski. He was in my corner, and totally unexpected, he walked in the ring, put his arm around me. He says, "I got to tell you, you've done a hell of a job." And that just really struck a note with me.
On that same note.
On that note, too. Yeah, on that note, Dory, do you have a photo? I actually have a photo of that moment occurring. Dick Steinborn took a photo that night, and it appeared in the Milo's Mat programs that they were doing in Orlando. And you could see it. It's. Do you have a copy of that? Because if not, I'd be more than honored to be able to get
I'd love to have one. I can give you my email address.
Oh, absolutely, then. Absolutely.
So, well, Dory, just that brings to mind one last question.
And really, for everybody else, my email is probably one of the most difficult because it's in Japanese. But it's my last name, Funk, but in Japanese it's F-U-A-N-K-U, F-U-A-N-K-U at Dory, D-O-R-Y, hyphen, Funk, F-U-N-K.com. And if I'd have known how difficult it would be for everybody, I'd have never done that.
I bet.
Well, Dory, talking about that night in Tampa when you won it, exactly how far out did you get the word that you were going to get the belt?
And that's one that you'll have to ask me at the Fan
There
Fest.
we go. That always leave them wanting something, right?
He's 100% right there.
Okay, champ. Listen, we really appreciate you spending some time with us here, because I have to tell you, Barry asked me earlier, should we talk to him, do a little Japan talk, and because I am a complete mark for the Japanese wrestling, I said if we start talking Japanese wrestling with Dory Funk Jr., we'll be here to midnight. So we're going to save that for the Fan Fest.
Okay, great.
So we thank you for joining us, champ, and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Dory.